Hi, Scott.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
Good, thank you. And you?
I am good.
Fantastic.
Congratulations, by the way, on your new headquarters. I saw the building there. That looked like amazing.
Yeah. Finally,
I imagine.
it happened. It's our probably fourth office, and probably we'll have enough space to grow here for another 5 years. So we are in Krakow. The weather is absolutely fantastic. Where are you currently?
I'm in Boston. The weather is not so fantastic today.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks very much for accepting the invitation to our meeting, which we held hold like regularly every half a year. Basically, we're trying to invite our community and introduce to them like really exciting people from the industry. So we work in e-commerce, Martech, primarily in Europe as SALESmanago, and of course, apart from basically just working with the software and then creating the software, we try to really inspire the industry and inspire the marketers around Europe. I'm absolutely excited about the fact that you decided to join and accepted our invitation, because honestly, I have been, watching your Martech landscape. Even before I actually decided to be an entrepreneur, and I really, somehow your activity really inspired me to. I was a marketer all my life, but the way you were presenting this Martech world, that really gave me a clear sign that let's do something serious there, right? And SALESmanago, like really your map, your commentary on that, was accompanying me, and I was sharing that across really hundreds of other meetings with the industry. So I'm glad you are here. And I'll basically, I wanted to have just, let you go with your presentation to our guest today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Am I ready to roll?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to chat with you about a Martech Supercollision, the smashing together of AI, cloud data warehouses, composability and no code, and more. It's a really exciting time here in the industry, right? This quote from Bill Gates that things like ChatGPT, that the AI revolution, every bit as important as the PC, as the internet, entirely possible it might be more so. And then of course we have crazy headlines like this one here in the US. Apparently a woman created an AI bot, married it, and started a virtual family and calls him the perfect husband. And I thought AI was just going to be coming for my job. So anyways, lots of interesting things happening. My name's Scott Brinker. I write a blog, Chief Martech, chiefmartech.com. I also work at HubSpot for their product ecosystem, and I've written a book called Hacking Marketing. What you might know me for more likely is some version of the marketing technology landscape. I've been publishing here over the past 12 years. And boy, over that time period, it has just grown remarkably. The first one I did in 2011 had around 150 products. The one we released here back in the spring of this year had grown to over 11,000. I mean, we all know that marketing has gone through tremendous changes over this past decade, but it's sometimes hard to quantify just how much marketing has changed. Like, could you put a number on it? And I would humbly propose that the growth we have seen in the MarTech landscape is one concrete artifact of just how much change marketing has undergone. So if I was going to put a number on it, I'd say marketing has changed by 7,258%. And it's not just marketing. I'm sure you've seen other versions of these software landscapes, popping up everywhere. Channel ecosystem management. If you're in sales, Nancy Nardin had the sales tech landscape. HR has its own landscape of, dozens and dozens of different products. The legal industry, or even for your internal in-house attorneys, right? Tremendous amount of software. Restaurants, I thought it was just about, cooking it up and bringing it to the table, but restaurants have become an incredibly high-tech ecosystem. Hotels have a tremendous number of SaaS technologies. I mean, even cannabis, has like a whole tech ecosystem that has grown up around it. And if you're thinking, boy, the people in procurement must really not like, all these other departments having all this software that they buy. Well, procurement isn't actually in a better situation either. They've now got dozens, hundreds of products in their ecosystem as well. There are so many software products out there in the world at this point that there is now a software product to help you create landscapes of the logos of other software products, which, okay, is a bit meta. This is a really phenomenal shift that has happened in software and how we integrate it into business. The analysts at IDC have estimated that by the end of this year, there will be more than 500 million digital apps and services out in the cloud. Now, to be fair, the vast majority of those are going to be custom developed apps, things like people's own websites or their, mobile apps, internal applications that they build. But still, a non-trivial number of them are also these packaged apps. And it's not just about the number of apps that are being created. It's that adoption of large stacks of SaaS subscriptions has continued to grow. This is some data presented in an interesting way, some data from a SaaS management tool called Productive, where they actually track the number of SaaS applications that businesses subscribe to, and from 2021 to 2023, on the left, small businesses on average went from 242 apps in their stack to 253. Mid-market companies from 238 to 235. All right, that was a little bit 335, right? And then in the enterprise, from 317 SaaS apps on average to over 470. And actually, ironically, marketing is not the department with the most SaaS applications. Engineering, operations, IT, and security. These all are departments that tend to have, frankly, a lot more subscriptions themselves. It's fascinating, even like a little bit more of the data that got broken down here by Productive is you start to see from 2022 to 2023, a little bit of a pullback. Obviously with in the pandemic time and the rush to do all things digital, there was a very large surge, in SaaS adoption. This past year, we've now started to see a little bit of rationalization, reining that in, but still, these are very large stacks. And so part of what we will need to be thinking about here, and we'll talk a bit about this today, is how companies manage, this diverse environment where, it's not just like a static number of apps in your stack. Some other data from another SaaS management company, Xylo, showed that for, companies with 500 to 2,500 employees, on average, they have a new SaaS app that's coming online, 5 of them like every month. Pretty wild, pretty wild. So with all this software, like what matters? Well, one of the things my friends at martech.org, have tracked the choices people make when they replace one SaaS application with another, and what are the reasons, like what are the things people look for when they replace one SaaS app with another? Well, one thing is they're looking for a better experience, either for themselves or their customers. Certainly they're looking, at cost. Is there a way to, reduce expenses? But then the next top two reasons are they're looking for better integrations or open APIs. They're looking for data centralization and data capabilities. It's basically this recognition that in a heterogeneous environment of all these different software tools, the ability for them to integrate together and for us to be able to pull data together has enormous value. And this is more important than ever because this past year, with everything that's been happening around AI, is we recognize we are on the cusp of probably pretty significant changes. Things are not going to be slowing down anytime soon. A recent report from IBM, where they interviewed CEOs about what factors they thought were going to have the greatest impact on their businesses over the next 3 years. Technology factors, which covers a wide range of things, technology factors is by far the number one. We know we are in this incredible period of change. And as part of an incredible period of change, we often see, the pattern of the Gartner hype cycle. I suspect you're familiar with this, right? Where new technology arrives, very quickly, the expectations of it get inflated far beyond what it can do. Then people realize that, we fall into the trough of disillusionment. And then slowly we figure out okay, actually, what's the real use, the real capabilities here as we go up the slope of enlightenment to the plateau of productivity? It's funny, we see so many hype curves that I almost see now very often there's an anti-hype curve, in reaction to this, of people like, some new technology. So what? That's total crap. See, I told you so, and tried it before, it didn't work. But the truth is, we do see these technologies evolve and become useful. And the rate at which that's happening is, frankly, accelerating. And so one of the things I often recommend is that, as marketing leaders, as marketing operations or marketing tech leaders, you want to sort of manage your company's journey through the hype cycle. I call this like the Goldilocks zone on the cycle. It's like you don't want to get too carried away with the hype, but at the same time, you don't want to be too dismissive of the possibilities, because this is technology that changes what our businesses can do and what our competitive advantage is. So over the next 20 minutes or so here, I want to talk to you about these three forces that I see, colliding together in the Martech space. Of course, there's AI, but I also want to talk a bit about data and a bit about composability and how these things feed into each other. So let's start with data. Because even when we eventually close out here with AI, one of the things that you're probably hearing a lot of, and I believe it's true, is ultimately AI is all about the data and the data you're feeding into this. So it helps to maybe step back and look at the way we used to manage data in marketing. We have all these different MarTech apps, and generally each one had its own database. And then we do a certain amount of integration between these apps, sending, some data from one app to another, throwing it over the wall. And this wasn't just marketing, of course, right? We saw the same thing elsewhere in the org and sales and customer, service. And if you thought it was sometimes hard to integrate things within the marketing stack, it was even harder typically to integrate things between marketing and sales, or sales and customer service. Now, over time, we got more and more of the data from these apps. We would push it into our data warehouses, or more recently, our cloud data warehouses, through something called ETL, extract, transform, load, or extract, load, transform, depending on a little detail there. But within those warehouses, we wouldn't do a lot with it. We maybe use some business intelligence or data analytics tools. But to be honest, the majority of the data that landed in that warehouse never got used at all. Now in marketing, there was a rise over the past 5 years or so of these customer data platforms, which have been one attempt to try and help facilitate consolidating data within marketing. But in these past couple years, there's actually been a more radical shift that has started to happen, which is all this data that was flowing down into the cloud data warehouse. We're now also starting to see, if it was ETL to get data into the warehouse, a unfortunately named class of tools called reverse ETL. what does reverse ETL do? Pushes it in the other direction, has made data sharing between apps and cloud data warehouses more bidirectional. And this is starting, this is still very early, but this is starting to become almost like a universal data layer. In fact, in some cases, we're even seeing apps that they store their data, they work directly within the cloud data warehouse. And this is exciting because, this is also accelerating the speed at which analytics and machine learning, other kinds of AI, can turn this into more of a feedback loop. That it's not just a one-way push of data, it's, this cycle of data, which also makes it easier for us to share data across departments. That's very exciting for marketing because this opens us up to new data and insights that we can leverage for customer engagements that were harder to get before. Even the world of CDPs has been sort of changing to often what they call a composable CDP model, where, they can also read data directly from within the cloud data warehouse too. Now, I know that's a bit of a complicated diagram. So here's the simple little version is we're going from the old world where marketing operations used to generate all this data and then just funnel it down into the data warehouse to something that is more of a flywheel, where yes, marketing operations generates data, sends it to the data warehouse, but other things throughout our business are feeding into the data warehouse, and we're now pulling from that to affect what we do with our marketing operations. And this has some really exciting advantages as we start to adopt this because, it's giving us a greater range of first-party data from across the company. In some ways, it's making data more portable, getting rid of some of the lock-in, that we've had with certain apps. And it also lets marketers leverage the data ops investment that often is happening elsewhere in IT or in data teams across the company. And you see this shift happening with, apps that are being listed in Snowflake's marketplace, which is one of those cloud data warehouses out there. But really, what's happening here is an aggregation of data, which is a little bit different than consolidation. We've been talking about consolidation in Martech for ages, reducing a large number of apps down into just a few or one. And at least based on the data we see from the landscape and, tech stacks, we've not been extremely successful at the consolidation strategy. Not to say it doesn't happen, but it clearly is not consolidating down into a very small number. Aggregation is a little bit different. It's almost recognizing that there's going to be a large set of things, but can we provide tools and mechanisms that make it easier for us to leverage that diversity? And there are examples of this out on the, on the larger stage, right? Like social media platforms, aggregate millions of social media creators. Smartphones, have aggregated millions of mobile apps. Data warehouses, which we were just talking about, like Snowflakes and Databricks and Amazon, they're aggregating potentially dozens or hundreds of data sources across your business. CRM, CDP platforms, right? They're helping to aggregate, dozens or hundreds of customer touch points into one environment where we can work with it. And in many ways, what we start to see is some consolidation among those aggregation platforms, partly because of the value they provide by aggregating, their particular domain. And aggregation can happen at different layers, right? It can happen at the data layer, which is what we see with data warehouses. It can happen at the workflow or orchestration layer for aggregating process. It can happen at the UI layer for how we aggregate experience for, customers or employees. There's even governance layers for aggregation to help aggregate control. And I threw into this deck just a bunch of different examples at each one of these layers. We talked about the data layer, at the workflow layer, you sometimes see things like iPaaS or workflow automation tools. At the UI level, even things like shared collaboration tools like Teams, Slack, and Google Workspace. At the governance layers, tools around privacy and data governance, identity management. And so the thing I like about aggregation is, we're coming from a world where we thought of tech stacks as being very fragile, that they would break when new apps or data were added. This is challenging because we keep bringing new apps and new data, to our stack, to something that these aggregation platforms facilitate, which is making them more anti-fragile. that they actually gain value from new apps and data. So that's sort of what's happening at the data layer, and it sort of leads into this concept of composability. And to talk about composability, I need to get a little bit nerdy for a moment, big surprise, and tell you about something called Conway's Law. So Conway's Law is a concept in software that simply says, like, okay, when you have a set of teams who build a software product, the software product tends to reflect those teams. It reflects the way they communicate with each other. I would actually go further and say it's not just about the way those teams communicate with each other, but it's a little bit about their beliefs, their culture, their philosophy. All of that kind of gets embedded in the software app. Now, what's interesting when you think about that is when a buyer, adopts one of these software apps, there's almost an inverse Conway's Law, that if the software app, captures, the way the software vendor actually operates, in many ways, the software buyer needs to adapt their company to work the way the software does, which is not inherently a bad thing, right? We're all going through a lot of change and evolution and transformation. And so actually, it can actually be quite beneficial, to like change your company to adapt the way a software recommends. But as we continue to go down this path of getting more and more sophisticated as to how we build our digital businesses, sometimes we start to chafe, at the constraints of that inverse Conway's Law. And what you're seeing more and more is, the configurability and the openness, of more and more software platforms, let companies not just consume an app or configure it, but even get better and better at being able to customize it or compose across multiple apps, maybe even create their own, And so this is when you hear people talking about composability, in software, that's essentially the mission. We sometimes use the analogy of like Lego blocks, just like you put together different interlocking Lego blocks, you can compose software apps or workflows or experiences that way. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know. I mean, Lego blocks, these are like kids' toys. Can you actually even build anything meaningful with Lego blocks? And actually, it turns out you can. Somebody built a ship, a model of a ship out of like 2 million Lego blocks. So hopefully your software isn't going to be that complex. But the truth is, when we start talking about composability, we already see it, through a lot of our businesses, composable, websites, or if you're a programmer, you might be using code libraries, or if you're using some of those no-code automation tools like, Zapier, even in some ways like spreadsheets, like Excel and Google Worksheets, let you compose things once you start using a little bit of the script language. So we're already starting to use composability. But I think what we're looking at in the years ahead here is being able to do even more. And we have all these different apps and data sources and maybe third-party APIs. And increasingly, what we want to be able to do is for any given app or experience or workflow is be able to pull pieces from this together to create the exact experience we want. And it's almost going from a world where we used to like buy packaged software and it sort of came as is. Or I guess your other choice was you could build something entirely from scratch, to almost a hybrid of these two worlds, where you get a packaged app, that out of the box actually, works a particular way. It's very opinionated, but you have the flexibility to adapt and change it as you need. And the reason this is so powerful is because as our businesses become more and more digital, we have more and more things that we want to improve. Like automation is one example. And I love this. Well, I don't love this, but I found this stat really interesting about a year and a half ago from, the Information Week folks that they were asking IT teams, like, how long is the average backlog when the business requests a particular automation? And in 70% of the cases, 75% of the cases, it's 3 or more months. That's a long time to wait for even a simple automation. And so this is part of what drove what has been called the no-code movement over the years is, hey, could we empower business users, or at least business operations teams, to be able to self-serve at least more of their simple apps and automations, and so there's been whole landscapes, a variety of different, no-code tools to support that. But it's exciting, right? Because in some ways, this is a democratization of technology. Technology tends to start out, it can only be really leveraged by experts in that technology. Then over time, it starts to become accessible by experts in other domains who are going to use it. And then eventually power users, regular users. This is sort of what we've seen in the shift from code to low code to no code. And in marketing, this is kind of where marketing technologists have really thrived over the past decade. As they sort of sit at that, intersection of, they're domain experts in marketing, but they're still quite technical. Some of them might even be, considered power users, in marketing. And I believe, Gartner has referred to this as like the citizen developer movement. And we see this happening across the business, right? For years, we used to talk about big data, right? Like all these different data things and the complexity and scale and how do we collect it and store it and analyze it. But now with all of these like no-code tools evolving and more power users and business operations teams being able to self-service needs, I think we've shifted into a world that I would call big ops, where it's not just the data, but it's the scale and complexity of the apps and agents and automations that are interacting with that data. I mean, a metaphor I sometimes use for this is if, big data was like this faraway data lake that you needed to be you needed a professional Sherpa to climb up to and peer into its depths for wisdom. The world of big ops, well, it's still this huge body of water, but it's much more of an interactive water park where everyone is splashing around together in it, which has its all set of challenges, as we think about, right? It's not just marketing ops, it's sales ops, revenue ops, DevOps, data ops, web ops, ML ops, IT ops, finance ops. Whew, it's a lot of ops. All right. So, but this is now going to bring us into, well, I'm sure the topic you are all anticipating, which is how this is intersecting with AI. AI, are you sick of hearing about it yet, or just getting started? Tom Fishburne, who is a cartoonist in the marketing space, had this great cartoon about a month ago. It's like, hey, AI turns this single bullet point into a long email that I can pretend I wrote. And then on the other side, hey, AI makes a single bullet point out of this long email that I can pretend I read. Not far from the truth. Boy, there's just been an explosion of software here around AI. Certainly a lot of like products, built on top of AI. And this list on the left barely scratches the surface. And of course, you're seeing like pretty much every product start to incorporate more and more AI features into how it works. But then there's a whole infrastructure underneath the AI industry that is exploding as well too. For marketers, it's a question of like, okay, well, what do we do with this? And the most recent CMO survey that came out a few weeks ago, says like, well, we're using this for more content personalization, more content creation. It's starting to be used for some programmatic ad and media buying, predictive analytics. Frankly, we've been using AI for predictive analytics for a while, but we're using it more. So this gives you a bit of the sense of use cases. I suspect a number of you are, testing some of these ideas yourself already. I have to admit, I was surprised. The very last thing here at the end was biometrics or chipping. Chipping being where we actually implant chips in people. And having 1.6% of CMOs say like, we're using biometrics or chipping. I'm like, that actually seems like a lot of people for that, but I don't know. The science fiction world, it's growing around us. So what are some of the things though that we're doing with AI? I mean, certainly you've heard about it on the content creation side and the targeting side, and so I'm not going to talk more about that. But I did want to share a few other approaches and use cases that I think are really interesting. One is that it's starting to shift the user interface we have for working with software. And one example of this is Microsoft Power Apps. They've added copilots, and Microsoft Power Apps is one of those sort of low code, no code platforms, and like now, this one example they had for creating a database, like you don't have to like actually do any of like the mechanics of the data. You just say like, hey, I want to add a column here, give me some recommendations for other columns for this table. It really becomes a co-pilot. In fact, at some point, I'm wondering like how much is a co-pilot and how much is its pilot, but this is changing the interface. I mean, if you can describe what you want, in natural language, increasingly we're seeing software apps be able to execute your wish. And to me, this is such a transformative moment we are headed towards, because if we go back to this graph where we looked at like these citizen developers, you pretty much had to be a domain expert or a power user to really take advantage of those self-service tools. But I think what we're seeing with generative AI is increasingly a lot of these like self-service capabilities are going to become accessible to general business users, general marketers. Ethan Malik, who is a professor at the Wharton School of Business, recently published a paper with a number of other folks where they did this very large study with the consultants at BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, something like 740 consultants. And they gave them all the same set of missions to do, these very like, typical consulting, management consulting tasks. And then they had half of them that, they gave the AI tools to use, and the other half just used, the way they've always done that work. And the difference was remarkable. Those who were leveraging AI tools, they got more tasks done, they got them done faster, and the quality of the things they produced was actually higher as well, too. And so this is the sort of stuff, I mean, there's a lot of figures going around about the impact AI will have on the economy. This is one stat from McKinsey, estimating that, there may be up to a 4.4 trillion increase, in annual global productivity, a huge portion of that actually in marketing and sales and customer operations. But we're early in this, Now, one of the things, if you're familiar with Clay Christensen, who has this model of disruptive innovation, the way he would talk about disruptive innovation is very often you have a market and industry where there's an incumbent, there's an existing way of doing things that tends to be fairly advanced and fairly sophisticated, and a disruptive innovation, it comes from below. It initially is able to do things that are very simple in comparison, and so like a classic example would be like, in the no-code world, no-code tools don't really replace software developers. I mean, if you want to do like a real software app, you probably need professional software engineers. But where they can be helpful is in these small little mini apps or like workflows or things like this that, quite frankly, it isn't worth the time and expense, of a professional software developer to do it. But if you could empower, ops people and business users at a low end to do this themselves, it actually allows them to get a lot more done, and in the model of disruptive innovation, they actually call this the underserved area. These are things that we probably wanted to do, but it didn't make economic sense to do them if we needed a high-end solution to make it so. And this is what we're seeing with bringing these AI natural language interfaces to more of these tools for analytics or like automation, is it's actually helping us self-serve more of these low-end use cases that just weren't able to be addressed before. Now, the other trick about, disruptive innovation is it keeps improving. And so over time, it eventually starts to come into those mid-range and high-end use cases. But what we typically see is when that happens, then it's the experts themselves who actually start to adopt and use these tools to amplify their talents and capabilities too. I mean, we could spend hours talking about all the, effects this is likely to have. But one of the things I get very excited about is even when we think about automation in our businesses, typically when we've thought of automation, it's been a very task-oriented thing. Like I want to automate this particular task, which has some impact on productivity. But as we start to have everything connected across our business through APIs, we're able to start looking at automation that crosses processes, that crosses multiple teams, perhaps multiple departments. And this becomes not just about productivity, it starts to become about how we orchestrate process across our business. And then at an even higher level than that, when we make it easier and easier for people to create these things and to iterate on them, to change them, to evolve them, then this becomes a process that actually allows us to accelerate innovation. The ability to experiment and advance how we do things, we lower the cost and time required to do that. And this is, again, this kind of gets back to that McKinsey stat of why we could expect, frankly, trillions of dollars, in productivity improvements here in the years ahead. There's one other thing on the AI side I just wanted to plant the seed with you is, I think from a marketing perspective, we also want to be paying attention to AI as a new channel by which we reach and engage our audiences. And a great example of this is ChatGPT plugins. Things like, for like, hey, ChatGPT won't just answer your questions, but with these plugins, it can do things like, find, flights and hotels for you. It can make restaurant reservations. It can do shopping for the groceries, putting things in your cart. This is starting to take on more and more of an agent service. And what's interesting is you think about these companies who created plugins for ChatGPT, right? This becomes a channel for them to engage with customers. ChatGPT was the first to do it. Now Google Bard is also starting to support plugins. We start to think about like, how these generative AI search interfaces are going to change the practice of search engine optimization. Microsoft Bing has also made it clear they're headed in this direction as well too. And so just something to be thinking about here, keeping an eye on as a marketer of these AI agents, how we will start to work with them to become a new channel to our customers. Now, there's so much more that's happening here in the world of AI. We've been talking a little bit about these like first order effects of like, hey, it's easier to create content. What's going to happen? You get more content. Oh, it's easier to create software. What are you going to likely get? More software. AI can help like make sense of all this content and data and answer questions for us. Great. Well, that's going to change traditional search engines. It's going to make the long tail of content and data more accessible. I mean, all these first order effects are really exciting and interesting. But the truth is they will in themselves be a trigger for a new set of second order effects, that as marketers, we kind of want to peer around the corner and see what's coming ahead. As we get more and more content created out there, trusted sources are going to become even more valuable. Buyers might actually have their own agents, to pull content, that's relevant to them. How do we serve those agents? More and more software is going to be great in a lot of ways. But boy, actually, keeping track of all these new software and workflows is going to be a new challenge, for IT departments. It's great that, data is now becoming more accessible to more people, but this is going to make us think about like, how does data become a marketing channel? How do we think about, creating moats with proprietary data sets? And then, certainly going on into AI executing more tasks for us autonomously. I would say this comes back to, that model I was showing you about the shift from big data to big ops. I think the scale of what we're going to see with big ops is only going to get bigger. So what's exciting is any one of these forces would be an enormous change and impact on marketing on its own. But you take all three of these together and the way they feed off of each other. This is why I call it a super collision. Martech's law, we've said over the years, is about this wrestling between the exponential growth in technological change, but the less than exponential growth in how we as people change and organizations change. This is challenging. I know everybody feels this pressure. But what we're going to see here with all these, capabilities around data and composability and AI is almost a reset that I think is going to change the level of capability across many, many businesses. And this is a great opportunity for us. One other stat from McKinsey I had found I thought was really interesting is, as they've been talking to companies that have been adopting AI or those thinking about adopting AI, those who have actually adopted and are really, the high performers, they've really focused now actually on reskilling and retraining up their employees, to take advantage of these tools. Versus those who haven't gone very far with it, they're like, I don't know, do we need new employees? Will we need employees at all? This data seems to suggest that like investing in your employees to really let them harness these technologies, has the greatest opportunity. And there's a lot to do to invest in folks. Ivan Mazour, who I'd cited that paper earlier, he had a quote recently that he was given much better documentation for the generic garden hose he bought on Amazon, than for this immensely powerful AI tools that, have been released by the world's largest companies. It's true. There's not a lot of great documentation out there. And so one of the things I will leave you with, this is my last slide, is the conference board interviewed a wide variety of marketers at different levels, and they were asking them, how are you learning about how to use AI? Most people, they learn by like reading articles, watching videos, exploring it on their own time, maybe talking with colleagues. But here near the very bottom, when it comes to like getting training and guidance from their company, boy, for the most part, I mean, like mid-level junior marketing folks say only 3% of them are getting that. There's such an opportunity for us as marketing leaders to invest in marketing enablement to help teach our teams how to leverage these technologies and unlock that, our piece of that 4.4 trillion in productivity gains. So super, super exciting time to be in marketing and Martech. Thank you for having me. And Greg, I don't know, do we have time for any questions? Happy to take a few questions if we have some.
Think there is no question at the moment, but everybody who wants to ask question, feel free to do that. Otherwise, you can always send a question and we will answer them after the conference.
Yes, and I know the recording will be shared. Can also share the slides since I presented a lot of data. So yeah, if you want to take advantage of any of that, happy to share that as well.
We have a question. What is the most often question you ask to ChatGPT?
Okay, I will answer that. Although it turns out, at least for me, it's not a marketing question. Typically, is my daughter is in high school and she's taking an Algebra 2 class, and every night, like, I have to help her with algebra. But to be honest, it's been a number of years since I've taken algebra myself. So I find myself going to ChatGPT and can you explain to me this algebra concept? How would I approach doing this problem? And I have to say, it is miraculous in how well of a job it does for that.
Great. Super interesting. I was recently in, of course, thank you very much, Scott. Great presentation, super inspiring. I was recently in the Tatra Mountains, and I met. It was like middle of nowhere, and on this track at 2,000 meters, and there was another kind of lone wolf walking. He said, "Hi, be careful down there. There's a bear walking." And I said, "Jesus Christ, what I should do basically right now? And shall I escape or something?" I decided I asked ChatGPT, "What shall I do?" When you meet a bear on the track in the mountains, and I just felt so much comfortable about it. I went further down.
Boy, that's one case where you hope ChatGPT is not hallucinating.
Exactly. Interesting. So there are some other questions from Osvaldo Spadano. How do you think AI will change human behavior?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a little bit hard to predict because of the fact that this is still so new. I mean, a year ago, right, it was like in November of last year, that ChatGPT arrived, and all of a sudden, like, wow, this AI stuff can actually get really useful. My sense is, particularly in marketing, let me phrase it this way. Most marketers I know are incredibly busy. the amount of things they have to do, the amount of things that they're like juggling, days tend to be like very full. And one of the challenges with that is often a lot of the things that are keeping them busy during the day are not the creative, strategic, experimental like ideas. A lot of it's just like this busy work of stuff that needs to get done, you know? And so my sense is, at least on this next horizon, I think we're going to see AI start to help us take some of the busy work out and hopefully give us a little bit more room, a little bit more freedom to do what we came to marketing to do, you know, which is to like come up with new ideas and experiment with things and try them out and create, and to be able to do that at a scale and a speed and an economy that frankly is, you know, like that, like nothing we've had before.
Yeah. I have one question. I just can't resist that. I'm a big fan of this Martech law, and this, of course, this kind of organizational change is never following the technological change. And what sort of best examples of crossing that chasm basically, and getting to the pace of technological change in organizations have you observed? I mean, what kind of, have you seen some operationally people addressing that challenge?
Well, okay, so I've never seen anyone get to the place where we change as fast as technology changes. So if there's a silver bullet out there to do that, yeah, I have not yet discovered it. However, I don't think that's actually what matters, because we are not in competition with technology so much as we are in competition with other businesses. And every other business that we're in competition with has this exact same challenge too. So really what it comes down to is not so much, am I able to change my company at an exponential rate? It's, can I change my company faster, or the things I choose to change, am I smarter and more strategic about it, you know, that I can do a better job than my competitors can? And this is where I think you see, like, I mean, one of the things, you know, the companies that are really good at this do is they're very thoughtful about which changes they embrace. They don't try to embrace everything because it, you know, it gets scattered. It's trying to do too much. You know, they focus on a very small number of things that are most relevant to their business and their customers, and they focus on making sure that that's what they're changing and adapting best. The other thing that you see a lot of is, you know, I've always been a big fan of agile management methodologies, you know, that started in software, but they've kind of morphed and evolved into everything now that all businesses are kind of software. And companies that I think become good at agile management, this ability to change as a capability, you know, they also end up with a competitive advantage in that environment too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Super interesting. Maybe we'll go to another, maybe one or two more questions from our guests, from our audience. It's interesting question. You know, what is your view on, you know, we are talking about the replacing by AI, all this customer experience kind of tag and the customer experience process. What if AI gets deployed on the other side, on the side of consumer?
Oh, I actually expect that will happen. You know, and it's one of those second order effects, you know, that particularly as there's just more and more content and more services out there. It's just, I mean, an individual consumer still only has a certain amount of time and a certain amount of attention. And so I think we will start to see over this next year, even more and more agents that consumers and buyers use to say, hey, here's what I am looking for, or here's what I would like. Go out and find the best thing for me. Or even something that's always on, something that you're like, hey, agent, you know, this is who I am. And because it's your agent, you trust sharing more data and information with it, you know, and then the agent can sort of be in an always on way of like scouring things to be like, hey, listen, I saw this, or I thought you might want to read this article, you know. So what that's going to mean for us as marketers, I mean, it does get really interesting. You're like, at some level, we've got marketers on one end and consumers on the other. But if we each have our AIs that are acting on our behalf, I mean, I think that's going to happen. How we're actually going to manage that and deal with that, yeah, I don't know yet. It's we're going to have to discover that one together.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think that Gartner has just published a first time this AI, generative AI hype cycle, and I have you seen that already?
I haven't seen that, but doesn't surprise me.
I think that happened last week. This was the first kind of hype cycle on generative AI by Gartner, and I think that those agents are there somewhere. I can't remember where, but they're certainly like as kind of tech. Scott, super grateful for you being with us, and I wanted to thank you. Again, great presentation, great feedback, great energy. I think that's really important. Super nice, and thank you very much. And I hope we will stay in touch. And whenever you are in Krakow, in Poland, just let me know. I'll get you a beer.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Speak soon, hopefully. In the meantime, I would like to welcome and invite to our next and start the next part of our meeting, which is a panel, a discussion. And I'm super honest with you guys. I have never led a discussion panel, apart from maybe discussing, with my friends, family, and then sometimes you need to lead the discussion. I wanted to welcome Nilay from Klevu and Ivan Mazour from Ometria. My friends, we met not so long ago, and I just believe those guys are super exciting leaders of Martech businesses in Europe, and Martech businesses that work in online retail. And I asked them to join this meeting and share with you, with our audience, their views on basically what's going on retail market. I would not go that far as to introduce yourself. So maybe Ivan and Nilay, if you could just share a couple of words about yourself and create some kind of context, maybe some stories, anecdotes about yourself as kind of icebreaker, and then we can move on. Really excited you are here.
Listen, thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting, Greg. It's great to be here. Spend a bit of time with both of you. Hey, as Greg says, I'm Ivan. I'm the founder of Ometria. I've been in this game for about 11 years. I've spent 11 years helping retailers and retail brands create experiences that their customers would love. My background is data, so I studied mathematics at Cambridge. I came to it with a sort of data mindset. I quickly learned that customer experiences were much more important than data, but that data could be used to create better experiences. And today we do that for about 200 enterprise retail brands across the world. Think companies like a Steve Madden or a Sephora or a Pepe Jeans. These are the kind of businesses for whom we unify the data and help them power experiences that keep their customers coming back. So yeah, thanks again for having me. Excited for a great conversation.
One quick question, just for a start from me. What made you go for, what made you go for Martech in online retail?
You know what? So I knew almost nothing about retail. I'd like to think that now, after a decade, I know a little bit. It's been helpful, but at the beginning, that wasn't a strength or a personal. I looked around at industries that were, one, huge, and two, undergoing massive transformations. And retail is so fascinating. Retail is a $40 trillion industry, which is about as big as it gets. So kind of box one ticked. But it's also been around for millennia. I mean, back in the day, there'd be sort of traveling merchants or, people that would take a ship and go to another continent to pick stuff up and then bring it back and then sell it. And then we got, the high street. Maybe 500 years ago, you got the high street in the first towns, and there'd be like a general store, like in America, a Western movie, we get a general store. And then you get like a high street full of shops, and then you get a shopping mall, and then you get the internet. And anyway, there were all these transformations, and I thought there must be a new one coming. And I'm sure data will power the next transformation of retail. Big industry, huge thing happening. Let's learn everything we can about it. And yeah, here we are.
Yeah, good story. Quite convincing. Hey, Nilay, what about you?
Hi, Greg. Nice to meet you. Hi, Ivan. and thanks to the audience. And I'm privileged to be here. I'm one of the co-founders at Klevu, and we come to Martech actually from a little bit different route. So we come from the background of we started the company with the premise in Helsinki that most sites have the conversion rates between 3 and 5%. And Amazon commands 13% site conversion without Prime. With Prime, about 74% site conversion with Prime users. So what is missing for how can we help tens of thousands of retailers to actually go from this very mediocre 3 to 5% site conversion to over 10-15% site conversion? And that's our sort of mission. And on that mission, every touch point that we can come across, which is whether it's search or recommendation or navigation, but any touch point that you guys do an awesome job to actually bring the shopper, somehow to the store, but can we actually hold on to that shopper and make that decision happen? So we started kind of from that journey, and now we are going on to the Martech journey as well, in a way that we are now facilitating the intelligence from this to the Martech companies, so that we can collaborate better and build that. For the retailer, we actually provide a lot kind of sharper sort of experiences that they can build and provide their shoppers very personalized sort of touch points again, that they can come back to the shop, or the new shoppers come to the shop as well. But so our journey to Martech is sort of from a completely different route. Yeah,
thank you. And what made you basically set up Klevu? What was the kind of trigger or the kind of final inspiration?
So search, we were actually working with our co-founder on, Ivan, our CTO, is actually one of the core developers of the world's one of the largest open source text mining platform called Gate, which has a roots in UK, in Sheffield, actually. Yeah. And so we were helping about 4 or 5 companies around the world to solve very complex text mining problem, meaning kind of really inferring or making the sense from a humongous amount of data set. And then we're saying, okay, where do we use this knowledge? Where do we use this money that we are getting from these little projects that are like super, super interesting projects? And then we kind of kept opening all the doors, but then started closing as many as possible. And one of them was that search. And honestly, we didn't think that this would take so long for us. We definitely, underestimated what needs to happen within search and discovery. We thought, it's just, to start and, we're going to just sell and that's it. But that was definitely a underestimation. So we had about 5 different areas where we wanted to do search, and we are still in focus 100% on retail after, over 10 years of journey.
Got it. Yeah.
Exciting. Congrats, guys. Absolutely exciting businesses. And then really nice impact on the basically retail industry. We just currently actually not just online retail, but I think general retail is experiencing really challenging times following COVID. I think everybody was hugely challenged by the market situation. Do you see any how do you see kind of market in the following year? What do you see any kind of signs of the market turnaround, or rather you think we should be preparing for another gloomy year for online retail? Ivan, can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think my sense is it's fortunately somewhere in the middle rather than a full gloomy year. But I spend a lot of time talking to kind of our clients and the CEOs and the leaders of those businesses. Majority of people are preparing for a tougher 2024. I haven't heard anyone saying, hey, we're having a great time and we are seeing that next year is going to be tremendous and it's all behind us. Vast majority of conversations are, do you know what, we'll either be flat or maybe we'll be a little bit down. We're being a little bit cautious about budgets. We're being a little bit cautious with how much we're either manufacturing or buying, depending what our kind of model is. We're going to kind of monitor the sell-through a little bit more carefully. We don't want to miss anything. We're going to keep powering ahead with marketing, but just kind of batch and blast style marketing we've tried for 2023 and it hasn't worked. So we're going to have to make it more relevant. We're going to have to reduce the volume because otherwise we're taking advantage of our customers a bit too much. So my sense is that, and this is now a personal bet rather than anything else, but my personal bet is we've bottomed across most of the global economies. So our biggest customer base is in the UK. We've got customers in Europe. We've got quite a few now in the US. But the UK was a little bit further behind as an economy compared to where Europe was and where the US was. And I think even the UK has now bottomed out. We're probably at the peak of interest rates. We're probably going to see inflation kind of hover and slightly start to come down. If 2024 isn't a great reversal, that's fine, because at least we're going in the right direction. And hopefully 2025 can then be an exciting year for all those retail brands out there.
Thank you. Nilay, what is your views? What is your kind of gut instinct telling you about what's going to happen?
Whatever is in our control, we keep working on it. I believe in that. But I think I feel that impulse purchase would definitely decline a lot. So I think from Martech point of view, when things were pretty different, impulse purchase, a lot of shoppers were just kind of driven by that impulse. And I think that part definitely is going to shrink. It is already shrinking, but it's going to shrink more. Average order value is actually increasing, also probably due to inflation and so on. But your prices have gone up, right? Overall, it has gone up year on year. So overall number you actually see are not that bad. But yeah, I think that there is still so much of that headroom. If you consider again what I started with, that most retailers aren't able to properly convert the shoppers who are coming to the site or even reaching out to the appropriate audience. If you focus on that optimization and efficiency still for next 6 to 9 months, there's more to gain for our customers.
So if customers, as you said, of course, they became more cautious about what they buy, there's less impulse buying. Do you see already in the data that you gather in Klevu that actually that results basically in more searches on site, in more kind of considerate buying, or what does it get reflected?
They're seeing that they would spend more time to discover things now. So, and that's what I meant as reduction in impulse purchase, right? Your time to purchase is longer overall. So like in September, about 910 accounts that I had looked at, that had about $1.2 billion of total GMV in our customer base. And we saw that $132 million of that was just through search, for example. But it doesn't mean that, say, it's about 11% of the entire revenue base was attributed to search. Yeah. But the other part, if you see, so then you can see that there are more people kind of, going on the store and visiting the store. But it's not that they would just buy it today. Of course, it depends on the item that you're purchasing, right? Whether you're purchasing a sofa or a necklace, your purchasing journey would be different, your profile would be different, and so on. But I think we are clearly seeing the more time, and then that lesser demand is attributed to that. But it's like people still, shopping is going to continue. That's what I feel, that shopping is so inherent, like even Ivan said as well. So it's going to continue.
Okay, thank you. So just if we can continue, if we speak about these challenging times, probably they will not end too quickly. Any tips or advice for retailers how to prepare for the kind of future challenges? What kind of strategies or techniques, tools they should use basically to become more resilient for that future potential problems?
I mean, it's certainly maybe kind of taking it as a large scale strategy. I think the focus on an existing loyal customer base in a world where there is too much optionality for the consumers, and therefore they're already limited consumer spend, they're already reduced budget. is now having to spread across all these possible retail brands that are offering kind of similar products, etc. In that world, I think the dynamic of focusing on your existing customer base becomes incredibly important. I can't imagine that 2024 is going to be a year where anyone will find it easy to acquire new customers via Google or Facebook or whatever other channels that they're using. It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be efficient. It's going to be incredibly difficult. And yet, for those businesses that have reached a certain level of scale, and we prioritize within our strategy, we really do focus on retailers that have got a set of customer data, have got a loyal customer base. You know, the kind of concept as a Martech business, the kind of ideal customer profile, the kind of the ICP. So, you know, for us, we evaluate this kind of ICP-ness factor. You know, do they hit our ideal customer profile, i.e., do they have a very big, loyal, engaged customer base? If they do, then the focus on that is going to drive incredible returns over the next year, and it's going to help that retail brand capture market share and differentiate compared to the businesses that are still having to pay lots of money for Google, for Facebook, for everyone else. And of course, the convenient thing is that means that it's vital to have a technology like SALESmanago, like Ometria, to be able to leverage that. So hopefully kind of we're in a relevant position to be able to help with that kind of strategy.
Yeah, fully agree. I think that, when I was observing top performers, top e-com performers that we work with, definitely, they are excellent at working with their current database. I mean, nobody cares about like lead gen or something like this. It's just too expensive, right? The CAC has exploded. Absolutely. Nilay, what about you?
What Ivan said, the time-tested formula, right? Be close to your customers. But yeah, I would just add one thing is sort of keep an eye on logistics, because like what happened, we have been going as a world, as a macro, we have been going through different kind of, very uncertain sort of phases, right? Or times. And it's sort of, if you have a customer who wants to buy something and you're not having that stuff, for very long is sort of very detrimental to their overall experience. So some customers that, especially like home and goods business, that we have quite a few customers in that space, there were many challenges because it was hard to kind of gauge what sort of these uncertainties, the logistical challenges could bring up. So having a better third-party supplier network and really keeping an eye on that efficiency, I think that's what I would just add. Of course, being close to customers is very important, but when customer is ready to buy, do I have the stuff that I, that he or she wants to buy, is also very crucial.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Going to the next kind of really very, very important topic that everybody is talking about right now, and it's data privacy, personal data privacy. Ivan, how do you feel about that area? How you feel? Is it the same across all the countries, or do you see any differences here across different cultures, different countries? How that basically data privacy relates to the necessity of actually really working with the current customer, with your customer base?
It's definitely a new frontier, isn't it? It's a fascinating and developing space, both on the legal side and I think on the cultural side, which is going to be much more important. So on the legal side, we've already had a huge progress over the last maybe 5 years. And different countries have established a different level of expectation to do with data privacy. Obviously, over here in Europe, we've got GDPR. Well, I say over here in Europe, the UK decided to bloody get out of it. So we have our own UK thing now, but let's just assume it's all GDPR. The US is a little bit looser, except for if you're in California. But then if you start looking at some countries further afield, they're much, much more strict. Anyway, so the legal landscape has evolved, and at least there's clarity. So basically in your country as a retailer, this is what you're expected to do. If you're a large international retailer, you get a big legal advice and they tell you this is what you are and are not able to do. I think that bit's the easy part. The cultural part, I think, is the really exciting part. because we've got a bet to place. And I think, you know, you and I both, and I guess actually, you know, all three of us had to place a bet, right? Because you're leveraging customer data for all the work that you do on site with everything. All three of us had to place a bet that consumers would absolutely be willing to share their data as long as there was a benefit to them. And that wasn't a given, it wasn't a certainty, right? When we were starting our businesses, that wasn't a guarantee. It was also possible that consumers would decide, you know what, no, I don't want to share my data. I don't care if you're going to make my experience better because of it. I'd much rather not give you anything, which would, of course, make our businesses far less effective at what we do. So far, I think after a decade, all I have seen across the core regions that we operate is that the cultural elements, especially as the newer, younger generation starts to become the consumer, has gone in line with that direction. They are absolutely willing to share their data as long as they get a very tangible benefit in return. They are also very quick to pull that data back as soon as you mess them around. They are not willing to tolerate any risk. They're not willing to tolerate any abuse of that data, any ineffective experiences. If they've said, okay, sure, you can track me, but now you're getting generic communication, they're going to say, well, that's not a fair exchange, and they will unsubscribe and they will block your cookies, and that will be the end. So I think for those retail brands that take a thoughtful, structured approach to leveraging their customer data, the people, the public, the consumers are ready and are willing to share with them.
Mm-hmm. Any examples of the most kind of strict approaches to data privacy you have seen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of countries around the globe. You know, you look at sort of China, Russia, all of those kind of countries where you are not allowed to run any infrastructure outside of it. The main copy of the data has to stay within that country. So already you have a very strong legal kind of mindset right there, saying nope, absolutely not. So any countries that are any companies, any retail brands that are interacting or selling into countries like that, obviously far less likely these days, but still, they have to be very careful with their tech setup. They have to be fully established. And then I think there's definitely a comfort zone in the United States culturally, where there's always been a culture of good service. You know, even physically, when you go to a restaurant and everything else, there is an expectation of a very high bar of service, of personalization, of being treated like you're the only customer. And because that expectation has been very high in the offline world, that expectation is now equally high in the online world. They will be your best friends as customers if you treat them well, but they will also go on Twitter and on social media, and they will start to tarnish your brand the moment they feel like they're not your best customer ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Nilay, what about you?
Very good points. I would just add one thing, that I think consumers would demand transparency more and more. That I think it's not about whether they would like to keep the data private or not. I think, like Ivan said, that majority of the consumers would be okay, but that transparency factor would be very important. And as a technology provider or as a retailer, it is absolutely important that you are very transparent with your customer base, that how are you treating this data? How are you processing this data? How are you deleting this data? I think if you can just make that thing very simple and understandable, I think that data privacy would not be the biggest concern. But most of the cases, at least when I have witnessed some sort of murkiness, is that because this transparency is compromised somewhere, and that gives that, whether it could be fully, without any bad intent, but it just creates that suspicion, if you like, because it feels like it's not in my control now, as a sort of data originator, if you like.
I love that. I think if we can create that kind of world, it will be much more beneficial to everyone who buys online. At the moment, the majority, I'm sure, of us see privacy policies that are written in legalese, and nobody could for the life of them understand what on earth it means. Like even we who work in the business and everything, you look at a privacy policy, you don't know what's going on. If retail brands were to create a friendly consumer-facing version of that really explained, this is what you're signing up to and this is what we're going to do, I think the consumers will be so happy to understand that, and so much more
More
open.
people will allow to share their data.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Nice insight. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right that, we as tech providers, we can sort of facilitate and translate basically and build the bridge between like, okay, this is the legal stuff and this is the real thing. Because otherwise all this, the challenge of personalization will not work, right? So on one hand, as you said previously, Ivan, you need to become super personal, right? And then still to do it properly, you need to gather more data, right? So the question is how to balance that, find balance between those two things. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Anything, guys, you could tell us about it when you work with hundreds of brands. You are observing what the best performers are doing. What innovative or something that is strikingly kind of interesting the brand online retailers are doing to make their omni-channel experience kind of exceptional. Ivan.
So I tell you what comes to mind, which is very weird given that here we are talking about e-commerce and so on. We've seen a real comeback of physical interactions. I mean, even more so this year than before. It was going a little bit in that direction, but whenever we hear about, oh my God, this has been an amazing customer experience, it almost always was a handwritten note, a little extra thing they might have found in their package together with what they had, but super relevant to them. And in-store experience, a lot of e-commerce brands have now launched stores just for the interaction, not necessarily even for transaction. So the vast majority of times that I hear something about, oh my God, this is a transformational experience, it's actually going back into the physical retail world. And I think it's because we had a couple of years after COVID where we sat like this on Zoom, and that became our status quo. And after a while, we realized actually it's very efficient and it's great to have this, but equally we want physical connection, we want physical interactions. So certainly that's a lot that I'm keeping my eye on at the moment. I'm trying to kind of notice and identify which great e-commerce brands are leveraging physical touch points effectively, because it really differentiates compared to just carrying on with digital touch points.
Anything that has changed in your opinion, because that obviously that kind of online offline aspect was super big topic before COVID, and then everything went online, right? And then we have the new normal. Everybody goes to brick and mortar. Anything that would change, the approach?
I think it's definitely moved away from offline marketing 5-6 years ago. Would be let's create a segment. So, maybe somebody goes in Ometria, creates a segment. Let's send them a direct mail campaign. So we send them like a small catalog or like a little postcard shaped thing with some offer. And then let's evaluate whether those customers come back and shop. And then based on the segment, you watch the performance and you see if the marketing campaign worked. I don't think that's where 2023 is. I think 2023, 2024 is specifically about how do you make this individual, how do you make kind of Greg or Nilay or Ivan, how do you make us feel super special? And I think the two touch points on that typically tend to be a very personally human-driven thing. So something like a handwritten note on, a handwritten letter, a handwritten note, or a handwritten even just a thing on the actual packaging, or a physical experience inviting you to come in and spend 10-15 minutes trying out a few things that you might be interested in. Come into the store, we'll say hello to you, we'll show you these 2 or 3 things that you've been browsing online, you can see them in real life. So it's much more to do with a small but hyper-relevant physical touch point versus a broader kind of omni-channel, how do I drive my my strategies or my channels.
So do you see that really happening, that online brands would really intentionally bring
the people back to the brick and really drive that trend of new normal of people buying actually brick and mortar, because that is like ultimately driving really a bit more loyalty than the online kind of interaction.
It's exactly what's happening, and I think this year has been by far the biggest. So we've been retail specific from the beginning. So 11 years I've been doing nothing but retail marketing, and our platform has always been very good at capturing offline data and being able to surface it and so on. But typically, not a lot of people cared that much about that component. It's good data, it's useful for analytics or reporting, but it wasn't like they were trying to get people into the store. For 2023, a huge part of our roadmap has gone into how do we ensure that we completely accurately geocode the individuals, work out where the nearest stores are, identify the types of stores, because some stores might be full price, some might be only for kind of the discount stock. And then how do we tie together the customer base and the physical stores and the communication to get the right people into the right store, and then attribute all of that back, because obviously the store manager is trying to make some money and the digital manager is trying to make some separate money somewhere else. It's a huge, complicated challenge. And it's been maybe not the number one, but one of the top 3 requirements and priorities for our customers over 2023. It's been fascinating to watch, actually, a lot to learn, and hopefully we've been supporting them in the right way.
Super interesting. That's exciting, like so the companies are bringing people back to the offices. Retailers are bringing back to the brick and mortar. That's kind of, for me, that's really optimistic. I had a couple of really offline events recently, like really meeting people. That's just a pure dopamine kind of. Everybody was so kind of fresh, so kind of really excited just to really meet people in person. That's
a digital bear is really not as scary as a real bear, right? You can't replicate that experience of yours in any other way.
Yeah. True. Nilay, what about you? What kind of things you're observing here?
One example, in addition to what Ivan said, I can give is actually how Wix actually started doing it. So what they do is, so let's say you're interested in doing your bathroom renovation or kitchen renovation. So they are going very big on bathroom and kitchen, for example. But when you go online and try to kind of buy stuff, they actually offer that our designer, you can book an appointment with a designer. Designer would actually come to your home. Right? They and the person who would come to your home would be like a really, would really understand that topic. They would measure the space properly, they would create, and then they would say, now I'm going to book you an appointment in the Wix store. So first they come to your home, and then you go to their store, and then they would book a 2-hour appointment with you, where they would have done a superb homework, that you would have a very nice design, like with measurements and everything, and then they will take you around in the store because you want to change something or whatever, and they kind of really build your kind of whole quotation there then, and then there's no obligation to buy. But I think the reason they are doing is that because you're gonna like that experience, right? Because it's super personal, it's extremely relevant to you, and you may still buy online. So it's absolutely fine that you are actually then buying online. You're not buying from the store. It's possible. You have a quotation number and you go and buy online. That's fine. But I kind of, I was reading about it, and then I went there and I discussed with some designer there personally to just kind of understand how they are doing it. And it was really, really kind of, well thought out kind of, experience, bringing that hyper relevant customer experience, where you are not saying online versus offline. You are kind of really immersing these two in a very, very nice personal way, to the point that the consumer will feel, this is, I want to go for it because it's so nicely done, So that's one example I think was quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, super. It's just it really kind of it's just it's growing in my mind. That I become really kind of aware that where the magic happens, right? It's like the magic happens where you can kind of create some kind of connection between online and offline, not only just bring people between all those two channels, because between those two basically channels, right? I think that
like intelligently finding some way where those two worlds basically connect, and that where the magic actually is, right? By that. So it's
other company
more about
that,
like really creating some kind of really process.
Yeah, one other company which is not in retail as such, but Pizza Express actually has done a very nice job on that as well. So I was impressed to see that if you are in their store, in their restaurant, sorry, and when you get your check or bill, you have a table code. And if you actually add that table code into your Pizza Express app, it connects that instantly, meaning you actually see you can pay as well inside the restaurant on your app. That is fine, but I think the key thing was in real time, they had connected that table code anywhere in Pizza Express restaurant, anywhere, at least in the UK, is in real time connected with your app as well. And it was again a very nice sort of this immersive way of doing online and offline, rather than, like you rightfully said, that not kind of put people in camp of it's online or versus offline, but sort of really find that intersection where you find the goal.
This word, that's super interesting. So, can we go to maybe understand your future outlook on tech, on how you think tech will develop? Obviously, I would like to learn from you something here. That's understanding is how those retail technologies would develop would be some kind of super useful for all of us here. But if you could share your thoughts on where those technologies will evolve, will it be like social shopping, some kind of conversational technologies, conversational marketing technologies? Where do you think that the growth of this Martech in online retail, where that growth would be in your opinion?
Yeah, go ahead, Ivan.
Ivan.
Sure, happy to jump in on that. I think some of the ones that you mentioned definitely have legs. I think let's apply this transformation, this AI transformation that's happening now. I think the concept of AI has existed for a long time, but I think there's been a big push over the last 12 months. Obviously, these kind of large language models have opened the eyes of individuals to what's possible. I think people are now more willing to accept the application of a piece of software within a human interaction. Less so maybe 2-3 years ago, but I think going forward, that's going to be okay. So then the question becomes, which parts of the retail experience are going to be enabled by the kind of concept of, an AI assistant, as it were. And we've always believed that Ometria should be the co-marketer, right? In the way that you have a co-pilot, the same thing. For 10 years, we have positioned us, and our entire product strategy has been around being a co-marketer. Now, that doesn't mean being an AI co-marketer on its own. It's not like, okay, build software. I mean, the whole business, the whole offering, what we provide to our clients has to be the equivalent of this crazy co-pilot who's 10 times more efficient and able to make you 10 times more effective because of that. But I think that's as applicable to just about everything else. So you look at something like conversational. Right now, it's quite expensive to get a setup where for every customer that comes on your website, you've got a human agent who has to interact with them via a chat box, or maybe even over WhatsApp or something like that. Once you enable that human agent with a large language model and with chat, it's suddenly possible for each person on the website to have a human shop assistant support them on their browsing, help them find what they're looking for. It transforms the dynamic of how do I land on a page and click around to how do I come to a digital storefront and be guided by a human being. So I think that has huge opportunities in conversational. I think the same thing is true further down the chain. So much further away from where we are, we're at the customer experience end. But you look at something like returns for fashion continues to be the #1 challenge. The cost of having to ship back, I mean, sometimes half the stuff and pay for the returns shipping because that's a market expectation. I mean, that's one of the biggest hits to retail margin, especially in the fashion category, that there is. What stops us right now from being able to apply AI to understand what a piece of clothing would look like and how it would fit on an individual? Before it was hard. There were maybe 20 companies that tried to fix sizing and returns. but they weren't applying kind of AI, they weren't applying machine learning, they weren't applying deep learning, they weren't applying a neural network, basically. They had to manually create statistical kind of Bayesian style stuff, and that was too complicated. But one of these neural network style approaches can look at every piece of clothing out there, and those data sets are available. Google pretty much has every piece of clothing, can look at 1 million people's worth of photos and can automatically create a model for what's going to fit where and how is it going to look. We have the technology now. That is going to transform sizing. It is going to transform returns. It's going to be a huge impact on retail. Anyway, a couple of thoughts there.
Yeah. Fully agree.
Insights. Yeah, we, at Klevu, of course, we are primarily coming from search background, so we have already launched something on conversational search, and that's something we are continuing the experiments with some customers. So we will be kind of really, our bet would be on conversational search and AI from here on, not kind of again putting that into camp of neural or vector, but rather, because who cares about vector or neural? Everybody, ultimately you need to build the conversion. That's what matters, right? And we want to have that kind of true multimodality that actually allows you to use the best capabilities of vector or neural or semantic and use that as a conversational kind of offering. But in terms of, I think one thing that would change, we haven't seen that yet at a scale that we would see, is the shopping of digital products. So far, overall, the world has seen the shopping of physical products or services or experiences. But I think my one hypothesis is that we're gonna see huge scale up into shopping of digital products, facilitated by new way of information exchange. I think how we are exchanging information from one person to other person or one person to an entity, that's going to change as well, right? And I think in this area, I think there will be also more room for, because we're going to, amount of data you produce, right, or will be produced around us. We were thinking we already have too much data around us, but it's that will be an understatement now. And I think ability to kind of really decipher what is real, what is relevant, and how do I make sure that it's secure. So I think in that, there are a lot of micro innovation opportunities in that area, or whether it's digital transparency or security or information exchange. But when any interaction happens between two humans, there are always chances of things going wrong, right? So at that intersection, you have a lot of opportunities to make it better so that both parties are happy. Both parties feel that they kind of got the best deal or best experience. So I kind of tend to focus on that exchange, that the new ways of exchange is happening. So new products would be needed as well to kind of address some of the challenges that we will face there.
Great insight. Really, really interesting. Really exciting.
I think we need to hear from you, Greg. We need to hear from you. Tell us, what about your vision? Where do you see the cool technologies? What are you guys looking at the moment?
Yes, I think that we really, currently with our product team, we really try to understand how to deploy the AI to, something that we do today, like really across all the elements. We look at, really channel or piece of tag by piece of tag, and then trying to understand whether that can be really improved somehow by AI. So, really exciting things, can be done around productivity, really, interaction with the customer, to make, I think, to help really online stores optimize cost of customer service, for example, right? Just as simple as, starting with, the way they interact, how they automate the interaction via live chats or some kind of channel, like online interaction channels with the customers, as one thing. Second thing, like really, I think that those large language models are super built for that purpose. Is really customer segmentation, and how something, I mean, you just, I think that even the imagination of the marketer, of
or even advanced marketers, analysts on, how the segmentation can work, what kind of segments you can build on what kind of data. AI is just like really giving some absolutely, exciting answers here, right? How to approach those segments, how to build those segments. So that's where maybe that's not so, so much forward looking as to what you were looking at, but I think there are many things that can be just simply, hugely improved, on what you already basically have in your stack, in your processes, right? So that's maybe not like 5-10 years, right? But
listen, that's great. It's tangible, it's real, and it'll help marketers right now, which is what everyone needs at this time.
Yeah. So looking at maybe at the past. Right now, we were trying to look at somewhere into the future, and we could be guessing about some kind of new technologies. If you look at past 10 years, 5-10 years, which technologies or ideas turned out to be basically not so successful? Like, for example, blockchain tech. Blockchain was like, oh, NFT. Everything was kind of NFT, right? Like really 2 years ago, only 2 years ago, right? And that really didn't turn out to be a big disruptor. And the technology and the tech technologies that turn out to be especially disappointing for you, at basically that didn't work.
I mean, clearly that was the one. You hit the nail on the head. 2-3 years ago, every luxury brand we were working with was asking, hey, can you support us on the launch of an NFT project? And, lots of little companies spun up to try and, support all of that. And some brands did actually go out and did do it. But clearly that was a fad. Maybe it comes back and maybe we need 2 or 3 cycles before it becomes a thing. Kind of the concept of digital products makes a huge amount of sense. There's no doubt about that. There's a huge, what do they say? I think they say that Fortnite is the 5th largest fashion brand in the world by revenue, because people buy skins, so they buy clothing for the game, right? And so if you consider that fashion, which it is, then you just add up the revenue, it becomes the 5th largest by revenue fashion brand. So clearly digital products make sense. But the NFT fad, I mean, oh my goodness, that was terrible. I almost can't think of anything else, to be honest. Nilay, can you think of another technology that was quite as big a flop?
But I see it this way, that there was this very interesting paper from, I think it's from MIT's Kevin is the first name, blockchain and the new architecture of trust. So I see that that it's a new form of trust, right? That was very much acceptable by certain, community or certain group of people just 2 years ago. But that didn't scale up for the whole society or wider society to accept as a form of trust. But I think if you consider blockchain as a concept, right, and then it kind of experimented with Bitcoin, which I feel is sort of a hype. But if you consider that as an exchange of money to be replaced or digitized, right, and that kind of, it's still there, so we cannot say whether it's failed or not. But can you apply that concept on supply chain, for example? So can you actually? So the concept of that blockchain, I think, is now experimented and is actually used by some of the largest kind of companies and retailers in the world, including Targets and Walmarts of the world. That can you actually digitize your entire supply chain? I mean, amount of value you can actually bring on the table is humongous, right? So yeah, but I think it's. Maybe the first example they took didn't play out very well. And there's no, of course, we are lacking the clear ownership. So that's why also it's, again, lack of trust. I think if there's a way that people can find the trust building in a genuine way, then I feel that the same technology could be quite widely used. But given the time we are living in, it's harder, let's put it this way, to build a trust on a global scale for almost anything right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll be sort of kind of reaching the final minutes of that really nice panel, and I'm super happy, about what is being discussed here. I think that you are so inspiring to many people that are listening to us. What do you I just recently met a guy that was talking so many things about exciting things about marketplaces. In Poland, for example, right? I mean, in Poland, we have like the largest marketplace. It's called Allegro. It's probably used by 30 million people. And if you look at how consumers in Poland behave, they usually, if they want to purchase some product, they don't use Google. They use, to search that product, they use basically Allegro. This is where they build like the whole knowledge about the category, the prices, who is selling what, and so on. So what are your views on marketplaces? Because I thought that, really they are gone.
I guess there's two types of marketplace. There's your kind of, eBay style marketplace where people are reselling things. Yeah. And then there's the kind of aggregator marketplaces that you kind of go on, but you sell new products from maybe smaller brands. And, we work with both. So kind of a big example in the UK, a company called Not on the High Street. They're very well known for supporting small crafters that might create kind of greetings cards or little gifts. And then they're the marketplace for those crafters to then sell the products to a big audience. And then on the flip side, someone like a Watchfinder, another one of kind of our customers, they are reseller of luxury watches. So once you are kind of happy to sell your watch, they'll go certify it and sort of sell it on. I think both have tremendous value. I think the first one, it supports small retail operations. Like a one-person operation, even how easy Shopify is and everything else is, at the end of the day, it's work, it's skills, it's everything else. So somebody who just wants to create and build and then have an opportunity to sell, I think making sure there's marketplaces is vital for that kind of creativity to flourish. I think the second type is incredibly valuable in a world where sustainability is required. Every time I go to a beach, I now, maybe it's because I'm getting old, but I think how grateful I am to be able to have a beach, because we might not have one in like 10 years, right? It's getting really weird. Instead of just enjoying the beach, I'm sitting there going like, what's the number of years before this goes away? And I think a big part of that obviously is kind of the carbon economy and global warming, but another huge part is sustainability and reusing products. And so I would love to see more reselling marketplaces so that the amount of goods that are reused by somebody else, kind of pre-loved items, increases. And it stops being just luxury. At the moment, sure, watches, handbags, etc. There's loads of marketplaces for that. Maybe electronics, high-end electronics, there's good market. But you take it down to smaller price point items, it's quite rare, it's quite hard to find a way to pass that product on to somebody else who's going to love it whilst getting a bit of money back. So yeah, I don't know if it will pick up, but I would love to see it pick up.
And have you seen any discussions about brands actually owning those kind of recycling or reselling basically used products?
For sure, there's definitely strategic conversations happening about how do we make sure that the reselling happens internally. I think when you go to the highest price point is probably cars, and the hard to find cars, all of the brands that create them now have a legal requirement in the contract that if you want to resell it, you have to give it back to the
dealer. That's super interesting. That's super
so
interesting.
See if that, it'd be interesting to see if that comes all the way down to the remainder of the product range.
Super interesting. And have you seen anything, Nilay, about marketplaces? Any observations from your side?
No, I think I would add one thing to what Ivan said, is that because of certain legal loopholes, for example, in the UK, if you, let's say, send only one consignment, right? If it is under certain pounds, it doesn't go through custom kind of declarations. So now I think if that is fixed, then I think the marketplace that are now kind of trying to build up here, because they can't compete on price. If you just see price, they can't compete on that. So I think I was talking to one of the co-founders of Rovio, in Helsinki, and one of the examples he was sort of sharing was sort of there is a genuine interest from people to buy products that they can trust, that has been built with some, clear ethics in place. So I think ESG, not as a kind of buzzword, but kind of really having a marketplace that actually guarantees almost that all the products that they are selling, it means the onus is on them to ensure that the third party do not enter, which is using practices that are kind of, not acceptable by their consumers. I feel there's a lot of room. There are some companies claiming that, but I haven't come across yet a kind of a one marketplace that actually guarantees, that kind of point. Yeah.
Thank you. Great stuff. Any questions from our audience? If you guys feel you're interested in something that was picked up here by Nilay or Ivan, let us know. Well, definitely, I think very useful. Conversation, and I'm super happy again that you have joined. Us, and hopefully we will meet. We will use that as a context to, as we were talking about, connecting this offline and online and offline world. So definitely, I would love to take a chance and meet you guys in person anytime soon, maybe in London or in Krakow.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely stay in touch. I don't see any questions. So we will definitely. I mean, you guys are pretty well known in the industry. Everybody can find you on LinkedIn. So I highly recommend everybody interested in digging into some of the topics here. You reach out to Ivan, Nilay, or me, and we are happy to interact basically offline on that. And again, thank you very much, guys, for your time. Absolutely, very good energy. I love that energy again that is coming from you. And speak soon. And see you in real life.
Thank you for hosting. It's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.